worker, Shelly. If you want to advance the slide for me, Shelly, we can do some more in-depth introductions. There we go. I am a learning and development specialist on the product education team here at Conga, and I've been working at Conga for about 1.5 years. And Shelly and I just actually presented the same topic at Dreamforce in San Francisco last month. So I don't know if anybody was there, but we had a chance to kind of flesh out this content there at Dreamforce, and we're going to do it again for you this morning. And I'll let Shelly introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Shelly Houlihan. I'm a senior product specialist here at Conga, and Ryan and I work on the same team. So like he said, have kind of become the dynamic duo of DIY troubleshooting, and we're very eager to show you our tips and tricks this morning. We're excited because these are actually the same troubleshooting methods that the members of the Conga support team use when you call or email support. So you guys are getting world-class knowledge here. We're very pumped about that.
Great. If you want to change this, there we go. What we're going to cover today, as the title suggests, are 3 common composer issues and how to solve them. So we're going to be looking at the first issue, when data merges incorrectly. Secondly, we're going to look at seeing incorrect results when you, as the admin or your end users, run Composer. And third, we're going to talk about error messages, because unfortunately, chances are you've probably seen an error message, so we're going to talk about what to do when that occurs. The image there on the slide is of a troubleshooting job aid we put together, and later in the webinar, Shelly is going to show you where you can go to download a copy of this job aid. We highly suggest you not only download it, but print it out and hang it up at your cube at work if you would like. That's the front side you see in the image. The back side of it has a really cool troubleshooting flowchart that takes you through exactly the steps and the questions you should consider to troubleshoot your solution. So again, we're going to be speaking to that aid, and later on Shelly's going to show you where to get it from. So issue number 1, let's jump right into it. Data merging incorrectly. So what do we mean by that? This could be when you don't see any data, or you see the wrong data, or, God forbid, maybe you see too much data. So what do you do when that happens? We have 2 tools that we recommend using, and that is the View Data Workbook and Salesforce Source Reports. And as you saw on the last slide, we had one of our little mascot, Mergy, we like to call him, in a hard hat. So what we're providing you, we're kind of trying to use the context of troubleshooting like doing handyman work. So these are 2 of the first tools that we're going to give you to put in your troubleshooting tool belt that you can use to help troubleshoot your Composer solutions. So what exactly do you do with the View Data Workbook or Salesforce Source Reports? Again, we are recommending these tools for something being wrong with the data itself. Shelly is going to take you into Salesforce and demo for us how you would use these 2 tools and the types of things that you want to look for when trying to solve that first issue with your data. So Shelly, would you show us how to use these first 2 tools?
Great, thank you, Ryan. I'm just going to minimize our PowerPoint presentation here and just bring over an internet browser that I have going. And this is just a development org I have, so it's all dummy data, but I'm logged in right now as a sysadmin, and I'm simply going to launch an account brief Conga Composer solution I have on the account, and I want to show you all that View Data Workbook. You'll notice if I move this Composer window, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. If I move it just slightly up, you can see in the contacts related list here, let me actually minimize this, you guys can see a little bit better. Here on the contacts related list, we have 5 contacts, Kristen down through Dan Kaplan. And so we want to include all of those contacts in our account brief solution. And you can see I have 2 different versions of my template, one in PowerPoint, one in Word. But before I actually do the merge, I'm just going to show you all in that View Data Workbook, you're going to click the Tools and Settings menu in the upper right corner. And then it's the first option, View Data. This downloads the Excel workbook that Ryan was speaking about. So it will display all of the data that you have available to use in your merge process. And sort of a fun fact about the View Data Workbook, sorry, it downloaded on my other screen, so let me pull that over. Fun fact about the View Data Workbook is that originally we did not have a template builder in Conga Composer, and this is what you would use to build your template. So all of the field names, here they're in rows, but if we get into a report like opportunities, you see them as column headers. But these are your field names from Salesforce. And whatever data displays here in the View Data Workbook is what will eventually be merged into your template. So for this particular opportunities report, you can see down here I'm on the opportunities worksheet. I'm getting 4 different opportunities, and that's great because those were all of the ones from my source account record. But if I go to this DIY webinar contacts report, you'll see that I'm only getting 3 contacts, Bob, Kristen, and Dan. But when I was looking at my source record, if you remember, there were 5 contacts. So this is a good tool, like Ryan was saying, where you can start the troubleshooting process just to see, okay, maybe I already merged my template, I'm not getting enough data, or I'm getting too much, or there's no data at all, like Ryan mentioned. So pull up your view data, review the data set that you're having trouble with. So in my case, it's the DIY webinar contacts. I'm only getting 3 results. So then the next step would be go one step back, if that makes sense. So from Composer, we're looking at the View Data Workbook. Let's go back to Salesforce, and we're going to look at the actual Salesforce report that is populating this particular data set. So let me minimize the View Data Workbook, and I'm going to jump here to a browser tab, another tab I have going with my report pulled up. Again, it's that DIY webinar CONT for contacts. And right now it's not displaying any records because I don't have the master object ID filter populated. So if you all are familiar, the master object ID just refers to what in Conga speak we call the master object. In my case, if I jump back over to my account, the master object is my account, and that just means where is your button or link for Conga Composer located, and that's sort of the driving force behind your merge process. So again, for us it's account. So what I'll do is copy the account ID from up in my Salesforce URL, jump back over to my report, and click Edit or Customize here, just so that we can get into the edit mode of the report, and then hover on my first filter where we have account ID equals null. This is the filter that Conga will populate automatically for you when you run the merge process, but for troubleshooting purposes we're going to do that work manually. So I will paste in that master object ID, again that account ID in my case, click OK, and I'm only getting 3 contacts. So that explains why we're only getting 3 contacts in the View Data Workbook. These are matching Bob, Kristen, and Dan, and Bob, Kristen, and Dan here. So this is where you want to start to look at some other things, start to do some of your DIY investigation, if you will, for troubleshooting. So we've got the account ID filter, but then you'll notice I also have and mailing state equals Virginia. So we're getting the 3 contacts that are in Virginia. Well, let's go look at the account. And I don't have the mailing state here on the related list, but I would bet that a couple of these other folks are not located in Virginia, and that's why they are not populating in our report. So somebody probably just accidentally added this filter here. If I remove that, you'll see it immediately bumps down to 5 records, and I'm now also getting Louise and Thaddeus. And those were the 2, if we jump back to the account, that were missing from our original source report. So other things you would want to look at, for this example we used mailing state as the secondary filter, or the secondary filter was the reason why we weren't getting those extra 2 contacts. You can see those 2 were in New Hampshire. But you might also have a date range filter that you want to look at. Generally we recommend that these filters just remain very broad and you keep them all time. Because you're drilling down to one particular record. All accounts versus my accounts or my team's accounts could also affect the records that display here. And then just the type of report itself. So this is a contacts and accounts report type, but if you had perhaps selected the incorrect report type from the get-go, maybe I accidentally did opportunities with contact roles, then we would be getting a different level of data than we would with contacts and accounts. So it's just all those things you want to think about with a report. It's the same thing when you're looking at one of your dashboards or one of your reports that you share with your executive team or anything, and you just go through it kind of section by section, filter by filter to ensure that the proper data is showing. So use those same skills when you're looking at your Conga Composer reports along with that View Data Workbook, and you should be all set. So the last step here would be that I would just delete my master object ID so that it remains null, and again Conga will be able to populate that automatically. I save my changes here, and then if we go back to our account record, I'll just refresh this page, and then I'll launch our account brief one more time and download that View Data Workbook. We should now see all 5 of those contact records displaying. So this will just take a moment while it downloads that data, and we'll take a look at the DIY webinar contacts data sheet just like before, and you can see we're now getting all 5 of those records. So that's the first tool in your troubleshooting toolbox. I'm going to pass it back to Ryan so we can look a little bit further at the next section.
Great, thank you, Shelley. So to recap, when you see an issue with your data, a great first place to start is looking at that View Data Workbook, and then from there investigating your data sources, be that reports, as Shelley just showed us, or a lot of times these same concepts apply to queries. So if you're using queries in your solutions, much of the same applies. You would still want to go out and review your queries and make sure that it is in fact pulling the correct data. So let's go and look at issue number 2 now. And number 2 is seeing incorrect results when users run Composer. So this may be users are seeing different results, so you as the admin see one thing and then your end users see something else. Or it might even be your users unable to even run or access Composer solutions at all. So when this is the issue, where do you begin? The tools that our support team uses that we are giving to you, the next set of tools, I should say, are to advance the slide for me here, Shelley. It is to look at the profile permissions, there it is, and use the login as user capability in Salesforce. So if we jump to the next slide here, we can see that beginning on the user profile, so here's an example also. This is what we mean by users seeing different results. And Shelley in a moment is going to go into her dev org again and show us this, this error we're seeing on the screen here and show us how to fix it. So on the left you can see this is you as the admin. You run your solution and your data merges just fine. Your end user though, they try to run that same solution and their result is, as you can see in the 2 screenshots, very different. They don't have any data in those tables besides their column headers. So this is a perfect example of what we're talking about, and Shelley is going to go in and solve this issue in her dev org in a moment. Before we do that though, and let's advance to the next slide, let's talk about some profile permissions that affect user access on Composer. So a great place to start when looking at permission and access issues is on the profiles of your end users who will be running the Conga solutions that you deploy for them. So to begin with, there are custom objects that were installed along with Conga Composer. Anyone who's going to run a Composer solution needs to have, at a minimum, read access to those custom objects. So you can see in my screenshots there, you're going to see Conga email staging, Conga email templates, Conga queries, Conga templates, and you may have some additional custom objects as well if you install some of the add-on products for Conga Composer. So that's a great place to start. Also, in the administrative permissions, you're going to want to ensure that API enabled is checked and that users can run and export reports, and that's also on their general user permissions on the profile permissions page. Why would that be important? Just like in the last example Shelley showed us, if your solutions use Salesforce reports, the users running those solutions need to have access to those reports. And then we have one more page here of permissions to look at. That is, and this is a very important one, this is an org-wide setting. Within session settings in Salesforce, you want to ensure that you do not check lock sessions to the IP address. If you do that, then Composer is going to basically be dead in the water. So you have to ensure that that setting is deselected. And then also some things to think about is folder access and then some miscellaneous things such as sharing rules, role hierarchy, and permission sets. So Shelley is going to show us where to find some of these settings, where you would go in and make sure you have the proper selections in place. And then she's also going to briefly show us the login as user capability. So that's the second tool that we're talking about here with issue number 2. And with the login as user capability, that's going to allow you to log in and run the solutions as your end users. That way you can see the error messages that they're getting. You can see exactly which data they are getting by downloading their view data workbook. So going back to that first tool set. So let's take a look in Shelly's org at profile permissions and then login as user, and Shelly's also going to show us how to solve that issue that we showed you, the 2 different outputs from the admin and then the end user. So Shelly, let's take a look at this next set of tools.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I'm going to minimize this PowerPoint again, and we'll go back into the browser here. Let me just clean up a couple of those windows. So I'll drag this over. This is, again, that same development org, but what we have here is the standard user custom, I know that's a little bit funny, name of a profile. The reason we call it that is just that we cloned the standard user profile so that we could edit custom object access and things like that. The out-of-the-box profiles Salesforce doesn't let you edit. So this is the profile that my end user, Carl Composer, uses again on his user profile. So we're looking at this. We want to go through some of those permissions that Ryan talked about. So specifically, I'm going to scroll down and kind of start at the bottom and then work our way back up. So first off, what Ryan started with was were the custom object permissions, and those are very near the bottom. I'm trying not to scroll too fast to make you guys sick while you watch on the screen share, but you want to look at this custom object permissions set. If you're using the enhanced profile view in Salesforce, this is going to be under object permissions. So all the permissions that you need are the same. It's just where you would go to access them that is different if you're using this basic view versus the enhanced view. So you can see here that I have all of these various Conga related custom objects. So one of the most important ones is Conga templates, and I have given the standard user custom profile read, create, edit, and delete permissions. The only thing that's required in order for them to successfully merge using a Conga template is the read permission. And that's typical of most of our custom objects, is that they only need that read permission. Now if you want the end user who has that profile to be able to create new records, edit existing ones, or delete records, then you can give those permissions as well. The view all and modify all are typically reserved only for system administrators, but again, those can be enabled at your discretion. So the read permission is the one that we're most concerned about. Conga templates, Conga queries, Conga email templates, Conga email staging are sort of the standard Conga custom objects that you should see. The Conga email staging is the one exception to the read rule, in that the user will need all 4 permissions, and that's just because one Conga email staging record will get generated when you're using the Conga email functionality, and then it gets deleted so that the next time a user initiates a Conga email, it can replace that old record, so that a lot of records don't build up and you're eating up Salesforce storage. It's just a way to sort of recycle records, if you will, but in order to do that, they require the create, edit, and delete permissions. So let's scroll up and talk a little bit about standard object permissions as well. This one is more just general to Salesforce permissions, in that whatever level of Salesforce permissions the profile has or that user has is what will get used for the Conga access as well. So what I mean by that is my end user is named Carl Composer. If he does not have access to campaigns, as you see here, if we include any sort of campaign data in a merge template, when Carl merges to that template, that data is not going to display. Versus cases, he does have access to that data, so that information will display. So again, whatever level of permissions they have for Salesforce data is the level of permission that will get used when they merge that data using Conga Composer. It's essentially like we're logging in exactly as that user. So it's not like Conga can go around and take a backdoor and get to the data differently. So keep that in mind, not only with object level access, but field level security as well. So if they have access to the object, like accounts, but they don't have access to maybe there's a social security number or some sort of customer identification number on that account, then that particular field will not be used in the merge process when that user runs it. Scrolling up a little bit, let's talk about general user permissions. There's two permissions here that are very important. One is export reports, and the other one is run reports. Anytime a merge process involves the use of Salesforce reports, like we looked at with issue number 1 when we didn't have data merging correctly and we were looking at that DIY webinar contacts report, the users will need the ability to both run reports and export reports. If you cannot allow them to export reports, many organizations allow users to run but not export because they're worried about their data leaving the Salesforce org and getting into the wrong hands. That's certainly fine. That's a security measure that a lot of people take. You would just need to use SOCL queries instead. And like Ryan mentioned, all of the information that we're talking about with being able to troubleshoot a report is the same for a query. You would just have to go about it slightly differently because you can't go into a report and run a query. You'd have to use something like the workbench or something like that to test your query. So if you can't export reports, go to queries instead. Another important permission is under administrative permissions, and it's this almost very top one called API enabled. The reason this is so very, very important, it's like the lifeblood of Conga Composer. So if you do not have the API enabled permission on your profile, then you will not be able to use Conga Composer, period. And there's no workaround for that. It's not like we have with reports and queries, there's another way to do it. Unfortunately, you have to have API access, and that's just because Conga Composer runs fully on the Salesforce API. So if you don't have access to use that API, then you're dead in the water. So that's a very, very important one. The other things you want to look at is what I mentioned earlier, just field level security. So an easy way to get to that from the profile is there's a field level security broken out by standard objects and custom. So for example, if we look at the Conga template, you would want to make sure that people have at least visible access to things like the name, the template group, the master field to set, all of these fields. You can make those read-only if you don't want people to be able to edit those fields. Again, that's up to you, but they do need at minimum to be able to see the field in order to merge with it and in order to use it in a merge process. So that's a real quick run through of the profile permissions, but let's log in as a user so y'all can see kind of how that looks. I'm going to change from the profile view over to the users, and then I had asked Carl Composer to grant me login access so myself as the system administrator can log in under his authority. If you're not familiar with how to do that, there's great Salesforce resources on how to set up those permissions, so just use their help and training, and it's very easy to do that. You'll now get this message in the upper right corner that I'm logged in as the end user, so I can simply go back to my account record and launch that account brief that we were looking at earlier. And I'm going to download the View Data Workbook again since we're doing sort of a troubleshooting theme here. And we'll see what exactly is the level of data that Carl is able to access. This is so helpful as a system administrator because logged in as Carl, I can see if there were any error messages that might display here on the Conga Composer dialog box. I can download his version of the View Data Workbook, and I'm just going to go through. It looks like he's getting all of our master data sets, but when I start to get into the reports like opportunities, you can see I'm getting the same message on all of them, unable to access the report for such and such. That's just the button URL on all of them. If I get into org and user, sort of our standard data sets, then those are again working. So it looks like all of the reports that he's not getting. The last thing we're going to do to troubleshoot that is just go look at the reports permission. So that's something that's not on the profile. It's on the reports folder. So that's another thing you need to think about is where things are stored and would the users be able to access them. So I'm logged back in as myself. If I go to the reports tab and look at the Conga Composer reports folder, click on the push pin and go to share. This is where you can see who has access to this folder. I noticed that it's only available to myself, the system admin. So what I'm going to do is I can either go to users, roles, and subordinates. I know everybody with the same role as Carl is going to need access, and he's on the Western sales team role. So I'm going to find that and click share, and then you can either make them a viewer, an editor, or a manager. For Conga purposes, they really only need to be a viewer. If you want them to be able to edit or manage reports, again, you can do that at your discretion. And then I just click done and close. And now if I log back in as Carl, then we would see the full complement of reports that we had in that particular solution. So that's quite a bit about report sharing, permissions, and the profile. The last thing that I want to show you all really quick is there's a very handy tool on our support website, congasphere.com, called Profile Permissions Required for Conga Composer Access. It's this first one here if you just search Profile. And it goes through all of the levels that you need to enable for the various objects, and it gives you both the standard view of the profile, and then if we scroll down further, the different view that Salesforce, you can enable the enhanced view and goes through that one. So that's a really helpful, another sort of tool you can put in your toolboxes on CongaSphere. I'm going to pass it back to Ryan just to keep us a bit on track here, and we'll go back into our PowerPoint.
Thank you, Shelley. So in the last few minutes here, we are going to cover the final issue, and that is error messages. I want to launch a quick poll question and find out, have you ever received a Conga Composer error message? Yes or no? Give you a few more seconds to cast your vote. All right, I'm going to close the window. And the results here are 50-50. Half of you have seen an error message and the other half have not. So let's take a look at what you would do, and hopefully the half that have seen an error message have done this before, and then the other half, if and when you do see an error message, you'll know exactly what to do. The first tool here is back to congasphere.com, our same support page that Shelley just showed us. There is an article here that Shelley will show you again in a moment that lists all of the possible error messages that you might encounter when using Conga Composer, as well as reasons that might be causing that error message. So that's a great first place to go. See the error message, go do your research on congasphere.com, find out why or what could be causing that error message. Secondly, or the second tool here, is the debug URL. So we're going to show you how you can get to the URL for your solution. It's going to be a live or hot URL, as we like to call it in the support world. And that URL is also going to have a lot of clues as to where and why you are receiving an error message. So Shelley, if you would please. Sorry, I'm passing the ball back and forth real quick, it seems like. But let's take a look at, and I believe Shelley has an error message queued up to show us, and then she'll show us where you can go to figure out how to fix that error message. So Shelley.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm going to log, let me close a couple of these browsers, and I'm going to log back in as Carl Composer so I can show you all what one of these error messages looks like. Let me just do that real quickly here. So we're logged in as Carl, and I'm just going to go back to that same account we were working with and try our account brief once more. So you can see this is a good one. It's pretty clear. API is disabled for this user. So I know that I just showed you guys the profile where API was enabled, but while Ryan was talking, I just went in and disabled that permission just so you could see an example of what an error message looks like on the Composer dialog box. And as Ryan mentioned, a very handy tool is to use CongaSphere. I apologize, I shouldn't have closed that browser tab. And search for an article we have called Common Error Messages, or if you just search error or error message, it will still come up. It's this first one. It has kind of the gold star next to it. And this goes through, each of these are hyperlinked, so you can open these in a new tab or whatever you prefer, but it will link to the specific article about that error message. These are in alphabetical order, so you would just want to find the appropriate one. There is quite a bit of information here, so sometimes what I do is use the Control F or Find tool in your browser and just search for API. So here's one about API servers are offline. The release 8 error messages are a little bit different than sometimes than the release 7 ones, but then it will give you an idea of the sorts of things you should look at when you're trying to troubleshoot this error message. So do you have session IPs locked? Are you API enabled? And that's actually what is going on with ours. So all I would have to do is go back, let's log out. I can pull up the profile for Carl once more, and I'll show you guys that I had disabled his API enabled permission, so I would just turn that back on and then he would be good to go. The last thing I wanted to show you all is how to get to that debug URL that Ryan mentioned. So again, if I jump back to an account, I'm again logged back in as the sysadmin, so we won't have any error messages launched this time. But just like we used the Tools and Settings menu to get to the View Data Workbook earlier when we were talking about are we getting the proper data, we're going to use Tools and Settings again here to access the debug URL. And it's the cute little one with the ladybug next to it for debug. I'm going to get this message that which login do I want to use for this, because I've been logging in with a bunch of different profiles or user records, I should say. So I want Shelly at Spring Training. That's my sysadmin. You may get a message that is allowing you or asking you to allow or deny OAuth or Open Authorization access. We highly recommend allowing that permission, as Ryan briefly touched on, because it uses the Open Authorization security, which is better and more secure. If you deny that permission, there's no problem at all. You'll still be able to get your debug URL. It will just use the typical or older version of the security, which was a session ID. So either way, you're good to go. Then you'll get this debug URL. If you click on it, it'll highlight the whole thing. So sometimes what I like to do is copy it and paste it into Notepad, or if you're a Word person, you can do that. Makes it a little bit easier, bigger to see. You can blow up the font. But the sorts of things that you want to look for are just the base URL is this portion at the top, sort of these first 5 lines. It's the Conga or the composer.congamerge.com session ID, server URL, and ID. That will look a little bit different if you're using an open authorization button, but most users it will look like this. Then it gets into your reports. So you just want to make sure that those are well formed. Do you have the right, sorry about that. Oh, and we're going back. That's helpful. Sorry guys, let me just close that out. So do you have the right parameter name in there? Report ID equals. Remember, you don't want any spaces. If you're using aliases with your reports or queries, those need to be in square brackets. You want commas separating each of them, so that's why a comma is sort of at the beginning of each of these lines. One thing that I can notice here is that I have this activity logging parameter at the bottom, but it looks like it says ACO, like the letter O. And I know just because I have these memorized, that's actually supposed to be an AC0. So be sure that you're spelling things correctly and things like that. You're not using O's instead of zeros, that sort of thing. The other thing you want to look for is that your field names have evaluated correctly. So you can see here in the OFN parameter where we have account brief and then Aetna Home Products is the account name. Just make sure that those are pulling up appropriately. So just sort of work through your browser URL. If you're not quite comfortable with doing that, this is also a great thing you can send to the support team, and they may even ask you sometimes, send us your debug URL or your hot URL, because they can go through it with you and give you some tips and tricks as well. So Ryan, does that sound good? Are we ready to pass it back to you?
Yes, definitely. And now we're a few minutes over, but if you hang with us for just a couple more minutes, we're going to wrap things up and we're going to give you a really handy resource. So this is how to access the debug URL, as Shelly was just talking about. We can jump past this slide. And to take one last look at the URL, because this is really important. It's helpful to know what you're looking at here, because it can, to some people, look like just a bunch of gibberish, but it's not. As Shelley pointed out, these first lines here are the base URLs, so it's important that you have those in place. If you do not have the correct base URL, you're not going to be able to launch your Composer solution or generate documents with it. So make sure that that looks intact and correct. And then beyond the base URL, these are the solution parameters that Shelley was talking about. So some of them are specific to reports that are being incorporated into this solution and used as a data source. And then some of the other parameters have to do with the template and the output parameters. And down at the bottom here, this is what we call an evaluated field name. So you may, in fact, be using merge fields within your button URL itself. And in that case, this is something to look at when you are looking at the hot or live URL. Make sure that merge fields are updating and being evaluated and updated with that correct field name based on what merge field is being used in the parameter. So those are all the types of things that you want to investigate and look at when you're studying that debug URL. And let's jump forward to, we already showed you that, so let's show you the job aid. This is the front side of the job aid that we referenced early on. This is a really great flowchart to use when troubleshooting your solutions. We're not going to run through all of this right now. We will show you where to get it, but let me just briefly talk you through this. It all starts with asking, is there an error message? So over on the left-hand side, that's the big circle there. Do you see an error message? If you do, you're going to branch one direction. If you don't, you're going to branch the other direction. So then it's going to be looking at different issues that could be causing the problems that you're experiencing with Composer. The kind of teal bluish colored circles, those are all the tools that we have talked about so far in this class or in this webinar. And those are congasphere.com, which Shelley's circling for us right now. The View Data Workbook, that's one of the first places to go when you're having data issues. Your source reports, so your View Data Workbook might indicate to you that there's a problem with your report, and so you'd want to go look at that one, and that's the one Shelley's circling right now. She did just circle the profile permissions, so if there seems to be different results between you and end users, that's the tool you want to go to, is profile permissions. And then to confirm you've set up proper access to all of the data in Salesforce, you would use the login as user capability, and Shelley's circling that one for us. The debug URL, which we just talked about, would come into play. If you see an error message, the error message indicates it could be a problem with the URL, that's when you're going to go and do that investigation with the live URL. And lastly, we didn't talk about this specifically as a tool, but your investigation using the other tools might in fact indicate that there is a problem with your template itself, and that's when you want to go look at your template, study those merge fields, make sure you don't have typos, make sure you are referencing the correct data sets, that your detail regions are well formed. Those are all the types of things that could be causing problems in the template itself. So Shelley, as we wrap up here, and we will give you time for questions if you want to hang out and you have some specific questions for Shelley and myself. We're not going to go anywhere, but let's just show you where to get this job aid, and then we'll take questions, and we will be done for the morning.
So thanks, Ryan. I'm kind of navigating back to that Congasphere page, and I'm having trouble typing and talking at the same time, but if you search for troubleshooting, this is going to be a little bit further down, but it's this, where did it go? Do-it-yourself troubleshooting, 3 common Conga Composer issues and how to solve them. So just like our webinar, and we have the job aid exactly as Ryan was discussing it right on an article here. So if you read this part at the top, you can get the PDF version by clicking this link here. If you just want to pull it up to refer to on the fly, then we have the images here. And so down at the bottom is the troubleshooting flowchart that Ryan just walked you through, and then on the other image are the 3 common issues we've reviewed, and then how to work through those to resolve them, and the tools that you would use for each. At the bottom we have that construction mergey to remind you it's do-it-yourself, kind of that handyman. He has a note about disabling background mode, and that's just if you have a DS7 parameter, ampersand DS7, anywhere in your button URL, just change that from whatever value it is. If it says equals 2, change it to an equals 0, and that means your background mode is disabled. You'll be able to get to all those tools and settings we've talked about, like the debug URL and the view data workbook. If you have background mode enabled, it's going to skip over that page and you're not going to be able to access those tools. And then just one more little reminder down here, the additional resources, we've talked about congasphere.com. We also have a wonderful blog, congamerge.com/blog, where we have great tips and tricks. And then our consulting partners, we have an Alliance Partner Program, and the folks are really helpful as well. So I'm going to just fire it back to Ryan. And do we have any questions coming in?
I don't see any questions.
Okay.
So we want to thank everybody for joining us this morning on our DIY troubleshooting session. And please do grab that job aid. I think it will be very helpful. And if there's still no questions, which I don't see any, I see Marie said great webinar. Thank you. Everybody, you guys are very welcome. Thanks again for attending. And we hope you found this helpful. And good luck in your DIY troubleshooting.
Thanks. If you guys think of anything after the webinar, you can always email support@congamerge.com and we'll get those questions answered for you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.